So this home has dual frontage on Mount Tom and Lux, which creates some interesting scenarios when you're trying to figure out setbacks. But so basically what you're looking at, there's the standard setback requirements. Whatever you build has to be 30 feet from the street. And on top of that, it has to be in the rear yard. So in this one, the rear yard, it's behind the house, and it's 30 feet from the street. So that would be okay there. It has to be 25 feet from all the butters. And that's basically any neighbor that has a property line that you share. And I do want to comment on that too. Sometimes 25 feet may be enough, but you may want to consider putting in a big hedge or a big fence to preserve that privacy. Because part of the process does allow you to go to public comment. And again, going to the project we just went through, we did end up putting a nice big privacy buffer between the neighbor on the left of the side as a courtesy and to make sure that it stays neighborly in the town. And then there are some exceptions that are interesting. So for accessory structures in Easthampton, if it's less than 12 feet tall, you can roll the setbacks to a much smaller number, to 6 feet. And it can be closer to your existing house and be right up about 5 feet. Now, the one catch with this, it's hard to design an accessory dwelling unit that's less than 12 feet tall. You can absolutely do it, and it can be a comfortable living space inside, but it may not look quite right, and we'll touch on that later. Design requirements, it has to match the character of your home. And if you're out in an area with a huge lot, and you're 150 feet from the street, the rules get rolled back again, and you can be 15 feet from any abutters. So here's just another example here using the same accessory structure backyard setbacks. And this one is showing, like, it'd be nice, we'd think, oh, why don't you just put it right there? Well, currently you can't do that because it has to be in the rear yard. So this is showing you can put an ADU on this lot, but it has to be set pretty far back. But taking this example and going to and saying, oh, okay, well, maybe we don't need a detached backyard tiny home. Maybe we build this same thing we were going to build and put a breezeway on it and attach it to the primary dwelling. Well, now we're talking about an attached ADU, and we can work with the setback requirements for your district, which are typically less than that of accessory structures. So if you're in some of the denser districts, R5, R10, R15, and that's generally like a 2 or 3 mile radius from Cottage and Union Street, this is something that I think would be worth thinking about if you're struggling to find where to put this thing in your backyard. So design. Not the one over there. It's not going to fly. So the zoning bylaw is interesting. It's actually ambiguous when it comes to design, and it's good that it is. It basically says the ADU that you build has to match the character of your home and the character of the neighborhood. What does that mean? It's kind of up to interpretation, but that's the point. The point is to give the homeowner flexibility in designing something, to give your neighbors flexibility in saying, not in my backyard, and the zoning board to mediate the discussion. So when we're thinking about this is what the one we got approved looked like. It basically looks like a small ranch. So it's very difficult to say that's not the character of the neighborhood because it looks like the other houses. Going to something like this, we're starting to get more modern. Someone could certainly make the case against that. There are very few houses that have that single pitch roof, all that glass. But if this was hidden in your backyard and no one can see it, well, what's the character of your backyard? I mean, it's kind of up to you. But of course, you'll probably need to be very friendly with your neighbors and have a conversation with them and make sure that the conversation about is it matching the characters between you and the zoning board of appeals. And of course, something like that, that's kind of one of the biggest fears of tiny homes and putting these things in. is just slapping together manufactured housing and having it speckled everywhere. That's pretty much not going to fly anywhere in town, even if it was hidden in your backyard. So building code. I'm not going to get too detailed because the building code is, what is it, Kevin? 7,000 pages or something like that. But there's some key things to think about, and it kind of hits when you're thinking about how big the home is going to be. So these have to hit stretch energy code, and that essentially means you have to have at least a 5-foot deep wall cavity to get enough insulation in, unless you're using high-end spray foam. And that impedes a true tiny home on wheels, because when you're talking about something that's 8 feet wide and you're giving a foot of it to wall space, you're really contracting on your living area. And towns are doing this because everyone's trying to get to carbon neutral. And they want a permanent structure to be to a high degree of energy standards. It also means it has to be on a foundation. It can't just be sitting in the grass. It can't be just plopped down there. And the foundation has to be engineered to hold whatever it's being put on. And there are lots of options for this. We evaluate everything from helical piles, which are giant screws that go into the ground that don't require any excavation, to shallow frost walls, to full basements. So there's lots of options out there. And then these have to be connected to utilities, and it's important. The sewer connection is very important. And again, one of the reasons why tiny homes got such a bad name, when somebody came to the town to get a tiny home approved, it was rare that there was a sewage disposal plant. And the reason for that is it's kind of expensive to put the utility lines in. And if you're not thinking about the location of this on a 5 or 10 year horizon, it's hard to make it pencil out to trench these things in and connect it to the city's sewer. Or if you're on septic, possibly need to upgrade your septic to accommodate it. And if anyone wants that, composting toilets, well, guess what? They are legal in Massachusetts, but they have to be connected to a Title V gray water system, which means it has to have a leach field. So if you're not on a septic system yet, you're gonna have to build one. So it's kind of economically infeasible, especially if you're on city water. And then egress, you've gotta have 2 entrances, unless it's 400 square feet, under 400 square feet of living space, and that goes into Tiny Home Appendix Q, which was recently passed this year in Massachusetts. It basically allows you to not have a second door and use a window, a large window as your second egress, which is great when if you do want to do something under 400 square feet. So now we're getting kind of into the financing stuff, and this is a huge topic, and kind of after you figure out if you can build something, I think it's important to figure out how you're going to pay for it before you go down the rabbit hole and spend even more time on the project. And the first step is to think about the cost. Like, what are you doing with this thing? So if you're doing this for multi-generational living, well, you're consolidating households. So you're going from paying for 2 homes to 1. So that's a good factor to think about when you're comparing before and after cash flows. Before you even start thinking about where you're going to get the cash to do this. Taxes and insurance is generally going to be cheaper if you consolidate households. Child care costs may go down, and it may delay assisted living. You can't care for a parent forever who needs a lot of help, but you could have them live closer to you for longer. And again, these are thinking about like, what is it going to do after you come up with the money to fund it. So if you're downsizing, thinking through this, there's a possibility that you can get rental income from renting out your primary house. And a full-size home in Western Mass right now rents for a quite large number. I mean, I've seen rentals go on for 3-4 bedroom houses for $2,400 per month. Just big numbers. Of course, you don't have to rent it that high. It'd be great if it got rented for $1,700 or $1,600 and got added to part of the affordable housing stock in town, which could actually open you up to more funding options if you were deciding you wanted to do that. And some of the affordable rents that would qualify for that are actually quite high. And we can talk more about that as well if you have questions. Downsizing into a backyard tiny home, it's going to offset maintenance costs. The home itself, if built properly, is not going to need maintenance for 20 years. And of course, someone will be paying rent to take care of the bigger house. You're going to have some cash flow coming in, and you need to compare what are the other alternatives. What are you going to be paying to go into a condo? Or do you want to build a new house? Things like that. And then finally, well, before I even dive into this, would anyone ever consider doing this as a rental unit? Is anyone in the audience for that? Okay, so I will talk. So as a rental unit, basically you're looking at this as an investment, and you need to basically figure out, okay, what is my required return on investment to become a landlord and convert my home into what's essentially a 2-unit, have someone coming and going. That number might be 7% per year, that number might be 20% per year, but you got to set that, and that allows you to figure out, is this going to pencil out? And these are typically penciling out, depending on the town, between 8 and 15% ROI. So that's an 8 or 15% return on your investment year on year on the cash flow. And that's just calculated by saying, okay, if someone's paying me $1,100 a month to live in this, and it costs me $250 to maintain it, what's left over? And we can talk about that more if you'd like to. What are your other investment options? There are other things you can do with your money. You might not want to do this with it. And think about what's your hourly rate to be a landlord. If you're going to make $12,000 a year doing this, and you have to spend 5 hours a month, is it worth it? Okay, this is the really fun part. So I'm not going to go deep into this. But there's a lot of options to finance these. It scares people because whether you're doing it on your own or bring someone in to do it, it's going to cost you at least $80,000. Between the trenching, the permitting, the installation, the materials, it's going to cost them money. And not everyone has that much. Nobody has that much cash saving to make, or very few people do. So Fannie Mae just released a new product. This is like an FHA loan. It came out last year. And they can help provide a cash out refinancing to pay for this. So it would be like a construction loan. The neat thing is it's a Fannie Mae product, so it's slightly easier to qualify for. Cash out refinancing, if you've got good credit, you could go along that route. And basically what they're doing is looking at the value of the home after you add the ADU to see if it would make sense for them to get behind. Home equity lines of credit. These are easier to get, they're quicker, they're cheaper to get, but they do have higher interest rates, and it would not be advisable to pay for an entire ADU with one of these. You would want to use this to fill a gap, $20,000, $30,000, because it does come with a higher interest rate, and you'll have a higher monthly payment. Reverse mortgages. So these have gotten a bad rap. I actually kind of like them, especially if you're cash strapped. So what it is, you agree to do what is essentially a cash out refinancing. You're going to pay a higher interest rate, usually a point to a point and a half more, and closing costs a little bit higher, but you don't have to repay it until you sell the house. So if one of the things that you're dealing with is you're at fixed income, you're a lower income homeowner, you use something like this to actually increase your income if you're going to rent out your main house and end up with a nice, accessible place to live. And this one I'm going to touch on briefly, but John from the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission is going to talk more about the home loan modification program. This is a home run. It's $50,000 to help make your home more accessible. And it's 0% interest, and you don't have to repay it until you sell the house. So it's insane. Every time I find one of these in Massachusetts, I just wonder where the money comes from. It's amazing. It's kind of like the Mass Save program. If anyone's used that to do insulation, they pour it. It's wonderful. The homeowner rehabilitation program. This is another grant. This is actually from the federal government. And again, John can touch on this. This does not pay for the ADU, but if you are going to downsize and your home needed renovation before it could be rented out, this could potentially go towards that. And then again, community block grants. These are kind of an interesting thing. They support aging in place, and towns can apply for programs that can help residents pay for this type of stuff. So finally, here's the call to action. All I want everyone here to do is figure out if you qualify. And we did create a DIY guide that's going to help you navigate the zoning bylaw and everything I just talked to. You don't need me to do it. You don't need backyard ADUs. But just see if you qualify. And the reason I really want you to do that is because Easthampton, I've been talking to counselors, I've been talking to planning, they're super interested in ADUs, and they're considering updating the bylaw sometime next year to make it easier. And if everyone in this room went home and found out they can't do it because of a setback issue or because of a building coverage issue or whatever it might be, and that information makes it to planning, to the counselors, it's going to make updating this bylaw a lot easier, and we can tackle that from a place of real positive support rather than not knowing what we need. So the more people that go and do this and figure out do you qualify, the better. And the timeline is the city, if anyone, some people may know, got a grant to do a housing needs assessment. So they're going to be looking very, very closely at how many units we need, who is having trouble, what are rent levels, and use that data to really hone in on what needs to be changed with zoning and what the options are. So that's all I've got. It was quick. There's a lot more out there, but please feel free to ask questions. Think of me and Kevin as a resource. We'll certainly make ourselves available. So I'll take a couple questions, but what time do we have? Okay, so I guess 5 minutes of questions and half an hour with a panel? Okay. So the question was, what if I don't have a single family, I have a multifamily, can I do this? So the answer is yes, but essentially you're not thinking about the ADU rule so much, you're thinking about what is the density in your district, and you're thinking about building coverage. So you're essentially taking on a bigger developer hat and trying to get to that best use of your plot. But it's definitely doable. The first place to go would be to look at how big is your lot, and then it's table 6.1 in the zoning bylaw. That's going to tell you how many square feet per unit you need, and essentially just calculate it out and try to figure out if you've got space for another one. And then if you do, you're just following accessory structure rules to add to the property. So essentially, at some point it's going to get a new assessment, and it's just going to look like additional floor space. So it will increase your taxes a little bit, but how much it increases depends on the valuation of your home right now. So if you have a smaller home and you're increasing the floor space by the full 30%, you're going to see a bigger increase than if you're adding a small ADU to like a 3,000 square foot home. So I'll repeat that because it is a really interesting, call it a use case for building ADUs. If a homeowner has a piece of land in their backyard and they don't necessarily want to pay for the ADU out of pocket, or they want to do some of it, finding someone who wants to partner with them and do some kind of agreement where they can build this in your backyard, that could be an option too. And it's something that we're very interested in trying to figure out. So, I mean, how fast they go up, it depends on your construction methodology. I mean, we use a modular process where we partnered with a home building factory, and we sprinkle in on-site general contracting work to bring it up to net zero ready. But we do about a week of digging the foundation, and then once the home arrives, it's ready to move in about a week. So it's very limited disturbance on the property, and it's one of the reasons why we build the way we do. One, it's very hard to find good labor to be on your property for 4 to 6 months. So we're leveraging building elsewhere and trying to get the project done very quickly. So it's a prefab unit, and essentially how modular works It's different depending on who you work with. There's lots of modular home groups around here. But what we do is we design the house. And we design the house, customize where needed, and then we provide the specs to our building partner. And they build exactly what we ask for, down to where to put holes in the wall for whatnot. And then it arrives 90 to 95% done. And it depends on the size of the truck. And that's a very interesting question. There is road widths, there's how sharp is the turns, but if it's coming on a smaller truck, it might not be a big issue. So again, it depends on how big you want to build. And then BB Tiny Homes in North Adams is doing something interesting where that won't really matter. They're building, so we have big modular components, which minimizes what we're doing on site. And they do smaller modular components. They're bridging something called panelization in modular, and that allows them to ship these on a smaller truck. So it would bypass that concerns. And they build beautiful sub 400 square foot tiny homes. And they're working on making sure that they're going to be allowed in backyards too. But it's called Professional Building Systems. But I can send you the link. Yeah, they do. Kevin and I went up there, went to the area and toured like 6 of these factories, and ended up choosing these guys after interviews based on the quality and attention to detail.
So I'm here to just tell you, this is like a commercial. I know you've got a lot of information today. So we're going to have a little commercial about Easthampton neighbors. Okay, we're going to switch gears a bit. This is for aging in place. For those of you who maybe are my age or have parents who are my age, we get to that stage where we want to stay in our house. But we need services so that we can. Sometimes we can't afford chores and issues around the house. So, anyway, this is a special village project that is going across the country right now. It's extremely popular. And we have a whole bunch of them going up around us here. I'll show you in a minute in Western Massachusetts. But we need your help, okay? We need people to be members to support this village. We need to support our older adults to stay in their own homes. So this is why I'm here quickly to ask you this before we go to the panel, okay? So this is going on right now as we speak. We are helping seniors, age in place, as I said, 55 and over. Those of you who live in Easthampton and are 55 and older would qualify. We have volunteers that help the seniors with chores around the house, as I said. We have in-home services like simple handyman fixes. If you need to change a light bulb and you can't reach it, if you need to change an alarm, if you need a little painting on your garage, if you need to unclutter your place because it's not safe, if you need some technical expertise. That's my husband with my granddaughter, teaching some computer stuff. So lots of us need that kind of help at this point. A lot of people end up even needing help with their smart TVs, right, and their phones. Lots of our Grammys and grandpas. Okay. So what we do is we're going to have a service where they will call in and we'll be able to match up the volunteers with the members. All right, so we have these piles of people. We have members who support the whole village. We have volunteers who can be any age, actually, if an adult is with them. We have lots of new stuff going on, like Brendan and I were out today trying to deliver sand, because lots of our seniors needed sand after the big storm. Well, guess what? Brendan ended up having to do half of it because we don't have enough volunteers. So there's a high school program going on right now where we can get the kids, it's called chores for credit. So they can go out and do the sand or the other types of errands that the seniors need. Okay, so we can accompany them and take them out, and we can have maps, and they can go spread the sand. All right, so yes, please, thanks. We are launching this spring, so you can really help us. We have a sign-up table back there, and there's no fee. We don't have a membership fee for our village. Across the country, Lots of the villages have fees where people have to pay for the services. We are trying to do it here where we don't have a fee. So you'll just have the volunteer come, do what's needed, transportation, the errands, the groceries, whatever you need. But we need your help to start it up. We need you to sign up to be members, to be volunteers. We need you, hopefully, to get people to donate if you can't yourself. Because we don't have a fee, we don't want barriers for seniors, we need to have people donate, businesses, people around, so we can pay for what we need to pay for. The only reason we're saying we have different bundles of people is because we need members and we need volunteers also. You can be a member and you can be a volunteer. Right. So we're hoping by spring to get it launched is the point, but we need everybody's help, okay? We need to get software to get the members lined up with the volunteers so the services can be provided. These are, again, some examples of what goes on. You can do some light yard work, you can change the alarms, as we said, you can do some handy fixes at the house. Transportation is a big one, getting people to their appointments. Now, obviously, we all know that they do that here at the Council on Aging, and they do it at other elder services. But what we're finding is, because of our demographic, we're going to be exponentially way out of sight. By 2035, we're going to have 40% of us going to be over 65. There's too many of us who need these services. So Brendan's been great. He had a UMass needs assessment done, and this is what it's showing. The statistics are showing that there are going to be so many of us that are going to have gaps in the resources. Okay, we're going to have gaps. In other words, people won't have the services. First question here we have for Suzie. Independent living provides seniors with smaller houses like backyard homes, but what other options do they have?
I think I covered this in my presentation. You have options of, you have lots of options for senior housing that include apartments, buy-in communities, continuing care retirement communities, when you need it, assisted living. I've worked in senior communities that were set up for veterans to use veteran administrative monies. And the coolest one I did was in Detroit in the Steel Belt, the Rust Belt is now what they call it. They took an old Holiday Inn, and if you think about a Holiday Inn conference center and how much common space it has, The veterans, guess what they wanted? A restaurant, a pool, and a bar. And it was already there. And they didn't care about big apartments, so regular standard hotel rooms. It was just a reuse of the space. And a lot of those are sitting empty right now around the country. I've been in some of the most expensive and some of the most modest, but nothing that was qualified as low income. Although, I think there is an opportunity to change density, correct? If you have a modest income part of your population. So I really don't have expertise on that, but it is definitely needed. So here's the second question.
What are the primary concerns that seniors in the Pioneer Valley have when it comes to planning their living situation in the later years?
I think it's the same across the country. Everyone says, I'm not ready yet, which is not a good thing to say. You really should make a plan. I'm not ready yet. Can I afford it? And will I get on with the community that I'm joining? And I think it's universal. It's mostly, can I afford it? And there are a lot of different options out there. Some are exquisitely expensive and like a cruise ship, and some are more modest.
Okay. So for Chris, you've made the case that homeowners can build detached ADUs, but there must be challenges in Easthampton and beyond. What are some of the biggest issues homeowners will likely face?
So yes, you can build them in Easthampton, but there are definitely going to be issues, and one of the reasons why I'm hoping that everybody gets out there and finds out why they can't build it, because once we have that information, we can change that. So the issues in Easthampton, setbacks are a big one. The setbacks are too big for our dense districts. Being 25 feet from your neighbor near Cottage Street just isn't going to work for a lot of people. And Lois, sorry, I don't want to, but I looked at Lois's property. She's got a great property, but setbacks killed her. The other one is the building coverage. A lot of properties in the dense districts are non-conforming, which means that their primary buildings are already too big for their lot, which means they can't add anything else to it. So we have to look at that. And then the final thing is the special permit process. And if anyone is on the email newsletter for backyard ADUs, I was doing a little bit of commentary on what we went through on the 8 Mayor Street project. While a special permit project and getting public input can be great, it can also create uncomfortable situations for homeowners and neighbors when you're bickering about things and it's out in the open and sometimes you never talk to your neighbor again. So that's something that needs to be looked at. And we ended up getting delayed by a month. I call it, we kind of got filibustered. And a lot of it was good conversation, some of it wasn't great. But looking at that and providing homeowners a way to get approval with like a site plan review by the planning office or by the building office would be fantastic and avoid some contentious conversations.
And a number of towns do have more flexible parking requirements. I know Northampton require 3 parking spaces for both units or are more flexible. But it's a great point in terms of climate change. And, have part of the advantage of building an ADU in the backyard is that there is infrastructure already there, and you don't have to build on a new lot. And you're in an area, I think it would be great to see more of them in close to village centers, close to town centers, so people can walk to where they need to go and have more infill development that way.
Also, Becky, could you expand on that and talk about some of the cities you've helped and some of the homeowners you've seen benefited from ADUs?
Sure. So I have been at Pioneer Valley Planning Commission for a little over a year. I've worked with the town of Hatfield, and I'm currently working with the town of Agawam to develop an ADU bylaw. And I come at this because I'm in the area of health and land use, and I work with a lot of communities on planning for an aging population. And AARP actually has a great resource called the ABCs of ADUs, and they're really promoting this as a way to provide more affordable and smaller units for aging population. I have heard at public forums in Agawam, and as I do listening sessions in communities that are doing age-friendly planning, people really want to build these. One gentleman came up to me and said, you know, I have an adult son with developmental disabilities who's sort of semi-independent, and it would really be great to have a space for him to be able to live close to us so we could still provide services. Other folks, there are several towns that have buildings with accessory units that are not currently permitted, and so when they go to sell their house, it's a problem. So just making these, you know, making some clear bylaws that make them legal and accessible, and especially for people who want to downsize and allow family members or caregivers to live nearby has been really important.
And what is the biggest fear that cities and residents have when it comes to ADUs, and how are cities addressing that?
I think Chris covered a lot of that. Ownership is a big issue that comes up. You know, there is a fear of changing the neighborhood character. So a lot of cities and towns require that at least one unit be occupied by the owner of the property. Another thing that's come up is short-term rentals, and it's important to have some kind of a policy for short-term rentals. I know Northampton just requires that they be registered, and the state requires that they be registered. And cities and towns can actually charge excise tax on short-term rentals, and that money can go back into building more affordable housing. But it's important to have a policy because in some cases, you know, people try to rent them out and then they get into problems with the town if it's not really, you know, if there's no policy, they call it a home business or something and get shut down. So that's another concern.
Okay, John, question for you. As your former professor, we covered a lot of this in class. This is a test. What is some of the housing assistance programs that are available to residents in Easthampton?
Okay, so yeah, Chris reached out to me and discussed about the presentation that he was going to be doing and what he's working on, and I thought it was very interesting. And we also thought it would be a good opportunity to allow town residents to know of some available programs that you might be able to access that are relevant to ADUs or just general housing needs. So starting off with the home modification loan program, Chris briefly mentioned this one. This is the one that it's a state-funded loan program that lends funds to homeowners that are looking to adapt or modify their homes to make it more accessible or safer for them to use. In the amount up to $50,000 at a 0% interest, and there aren't any monthly payments that are required to be made. The only time that the amount is recaptured is when you sell or transfer the title of the home. So common modifications include kitchen, bathroom remodeling, ramps, but also accessory dwelling units. So something I would make sure that it does need to be documented from a medical professional of some kind that there is a need, and this is going to improve the living situation. So whether that is in terms of the kind of Becky indicated an example that we see commonly, whether it's a child that's coming of age who has developmentally disabled disabilities or autism, where the parents want them to remain close to them or in the home as much as they can be, but also at the same time allowing them to have their own space. So that's a good example where that loan would be useful. And then another separate program, we as PVPC administer Community Development Block Grant, or at least one activity called the Housing Rehabilitation Assistance Program. And that program is more for general home repair, bringing things in your home up to code. So it's not really related to ADUs, but it is useful for town residents to be aware I'm not exactly sure of the amount of funding that's available, but our agency administers the program, so there is a wait list, and I can make sure to let you know if there's more available funding there, so, yeah.
Any other questions from the audience? Yes.
I have kind of a two-part. One is how many ADUs can be on say you have a lot of land that could hold 2, 3, 4. Are you limited by the only one? And the other question is why aren't they also thinking about neighborhoods that are tiny houses and fitting in? Because we have McMansions that take up all the space, if needed, plus all this land. Why aren't we making little tiny house communities, which are affordable for younger folks, for couples, and elders? So, you know, and also it goes into the neighborhoods helping each other.
Right.
You can also create that as well. So I'm just curious, is it going in that direction, or is?
Yeah, I can answer that. I think we have quarterly meetings of all the professional planners in the region, and we recently had Carolyn Mish from Northampton come, and Northampton's really gone through an evolution of accessory dwelling units, from allowing the attached ones by right and the detached ones by special permit, and they've graduated into allowing the detached ones by, I think, just an administrative permit. But they're also trying out, I think they call it cottage development, where they do allow several small houses on a property in a town center area. And I can't say more than that, but they're definitely looking at that, and I think that's a great direction to be going. Because you know, also in age-friendly planning, I find that a lot of people, you know, when they want to move, when they're downsizing, they want to move into a community, they want to be in, you know, close to services, and they are having a hard time finding, you know, first floor or single floor houses that are within walking distance of a downtown. So infill development of that type is really, that'll be key.
And to follow on the part about how many ADUs per lot and why not put a lot. So ADU in specifically just one per lot. But if you have a big lot, you could turn it into a multifamily home. And then we're talking about maybe you create a 4-family and you do have 3 backyard homes or 3 mini apartments that are detached. And it goes into what Becky was saying about what Northampton's doing. It just becomes it's like a 4-family or a 5-family. It's just not a big ugly building. It's a nice little cottage development. And I'm actually looking for land to do that on. There's a handful of like half-acre to 1-acre lots in Easthampton that I'd love to be able to purchase from the city to do just that. And Easthampton would be a great place for it. And the lots that I was taking a peek at are walking distance and would be a fantastic cottage development.
Yes.
Now, one more question for clarification. When looking at an existing house to do the ADU, you mentioned you have to adhere to a certain percentage of free space depending on what zoning you happen to live in. What sort of structures or existing items, like patios, for example, because I don't know, is the intention behind having the percentage be having raindrops hit the dirt? Or, you know, I mean, is like a paved driveway count as square footage? Or is it just the footprint of the home or square footage of the home? Specifically, I was thinking like paved driveways, paver patios, and sheds. Like this
I don't think the intent is impervious surface. Specifically in Easthampton, it's your primary building and then permanent accessory structures. So the building coverage, you're looking at the primary home, and if you have an attached garage, that can only be a certain portion of your total land. Mm-hmm. And then there's a second piece that says you can only have 25% of your backyard covered by structures. And those are sheds, they're buildings that are attached to the ground. Okay. So they're maybe outside of here, there's issues with impervious surface, but there's other ways that control for that. when we're thinking about the building process, having to do drainage holes and giving gutters and making sure that you're not going to create runoff issues. That actually was there was a unfortunate project in 2016 in Greenfield. Their first detached ADU hearing was one of the complaints of a neighbor brought up issues with drainage. And we're talking about a 2.5, 3 acre lot. And they were adding a small little ADU in the backyard, and the neighbor brought that up as a way to try to shut the project down because they just didn't want it within any view of their property. But I just kind of thought that was absolutely bizarre.
Anything else? Okay, so yes?
It seems really intriguing as a way to take care of people with disabilities and, loved ones with brain injuries, high-functioning folks. Has there been any conversation with like Mass Rehab or the Department of Developmental Services, or it just seems like such a great solution, and maybe there's some grant money to be had?
Yeah, that's what kind of I briefly described the home modification loan program. That is out of Mass Rehabilitation Commission with a source of funding through. And the PVPC is a provider agency of the town or city of Easthampton. But that's exactly what it's designed to do, to fund projects to allow, people to either provide, accessible or living space for their son or daughter or themselves.
So the program he's talking about, the home loan modification program, is quite flexible, and so that can be used for exactly that. If it goes as far, correct me if I'm wrong, if you're a landlord and want to make a unit accessible for someone with a disability, you could use this program for that. So if you're a homeowner and you just want to create an ADU for a friend with a disability, you can do that. It just helps someone age in place.
Yes?
Are there income limits on the home modification loan program?
Yes, there are. Good question. So for one person, it would be up to $166,000, and then it goes up from there pretty substantially. Yeah. So it's not necessarily for low to moderate income people.
My question, I'm a realtor, my question is about resale, especially if someone wants to build one on someone else's property and they come up with a contract and an agreement to do so. Does it run with the land? Can it be sold individually? Is it part of the home that already exists? How does that happen when you go to resell a home and a property?
I think right now, ADUs are generally owned by the property owner. I haven't heard of any cases yet where you actually, someone else owns the accessory unit. Although I think Northampton was kind of looking into that. There was a big forum on tiny houses, and we're looking into possibilities for subdividing, or it gets pretty complicated. But right now, I think it goes with the primary residence.
So if it goes with the primary residence, is it assessed as part of the home as a whole, or will it have its own value assessment separately than the home? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I believe it would go with the home as a whole.
So luckily I just sat through a webinar that talked about this on the West Coast. So there are not comps for these, which creates...
That's why we're here.
Yeah, and that's, it does create an interesting situation when you're selling it. There's certainly uncertainty, and that also plays into getting the traditional financing for these. How they come back, it's a little unknown. What seems to be happening is when there isn't comps, it's additional square feet. It's an additional bedroom, it's additional bathroom, and a second kitchen, which, what does that do? So if we're thinking about price per square foot around here, adding this to a home in Amherst where the price per square foot is in the 300s, you're potentially going to add this and be equity positive right away, like get almost dollar for dollar because you're adding square feet. But if you do it in, say, one of the hill towns where homes sell for the hundreds, you're potentially not going to get the full investment added to your equity. And I had a great conversation with Wayne Fiden, who is the planner in Northampton, and he made a comment that, because I'm like quasi for Airbnb, I don't love it, I don't hate it, and I would rather these not be short-term rentals, because I want to see them get added as long-term. But he made the point that if someone's going to create this, if it can be used as a short-term rental, but for no other reason, let them create it, because 5 or 10 years it may end up being added to the housing stock. So kind of an interesting case. I don't know if you wanted to.
Yeah, and to that point, you know, if it is a short-term rental, it allows other units to be long-term rentals too. I think it's just, again, adding to the housing stock. But there was a case in another community in Agawam where, you know, someone sort of built an illegal ADU in their basement and then tried to rent it out on Airbnb, and then the town came down and said, no, you know, they don't allow ADUs in the first place. But it is important to have a policy and to just sort of understand where the town is at. Some of our communities have bylaws for short-term rentals and some don't. It's something that's sort of coming down the road. So it's important to have that conversation along with the ADU conversation.
And I want to add one more thing. I said in Easthampton, it's allowed. It's not allowed. But if you were putting a short-term rental ADU in front of the ZBA, what's likely, unless you have just wonderful relationship with your neighbors, what will likely happen is somebody will argue that that's not in the spirit of the bylaw, because the bylaw said it's created for creating housing for people with disabilities, for aging in place, and add affordable housing. That's not one of the three. So there will be a contentious ZBA hearing. So it would be key to know your neighbors before proposing it.